4K. Typically, when you hear a resolution like that, you start to think dollar signs. It's not a cheap avenue to go down to game at that kind of a resolution. Well, not typically. Today, though, I'm going to see if we can put together an emulation PC for about $200 to tackle one of my favorite generations with the PS2 and the GameCube. I want to be able to play these games at 4K, 60 FPS. So that'll be interesting to see if we can pull that one off. And if nothing else, hopefully it maybe open your mind a bit to what older hardware even can still do now, making these games look better than ever. So we'll see what we can do here, guys. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you're new. We're starting today with this video sponsor as I get everything set up. Today's video is sponsored by VITURE. Right now, you can walk into more than 200 Best Buy locations around the US and actually try the VITURE XR glasses for yourself. And that's the best way to understand what makes them special. The moment you put them on, it feels like a massive theater screen is floating right in front of you. It's one of those things you have to see in person to really get, and now you finally can. VITURE transforms any space into your own private entertainment zone. Whether you're traveling, lounging on the couch, or just relaxing at night, the glasses give you a bright, crisp 1080p image at 60 frames per second. Movies, games, streaming, everything looks vivid and immersive without disturbing anyone around you. It's like carrying a 120-inch display in your pocket. And right now, VITURE is doing something really cool, a full Cyberpunk 2077 collaboration. This limited edition release includes custom styling, details, and thematic elements inspired by Night City itself. It's the kind of collab that feels like it actually fits the futuristic tech behind the product. The Best Buy display has Cyberpunk 2077 footage you can check out right now using VITURE's XR glasses. What makes VITURE even better is how simple it is. Plug it into your device and you're instantly immersed. No bulky headset, no complicated setup. Reviewers have been calling VITURE some of the best smart glasses on the market thanks to that smooth XR experience and convenience of being able to take your screen with you anywhere. So if you've been curious about XR glasses or just want to see the Cyberpunk collaboration up close, head to your local Best Buy and try VITURE for yourself, or check out the link in the description below to learn more. Thanks to VITURE for sponsoring today's video. Coming up with a PC to build on is getting more and more difficult as the days pass and the prices go up. So we're going to have to go back to old reliable used office PCs on eBay. Now, I do have to be somewhat mindful here with the system I pick, especially since I'm trying to keep it at $200 or less. So unfortunately, I'll have to sacrifice a bit on the form factor. I do enjoy making those really small emulation PCs, and I have an entire video setting one up for 1080p, but 4K does become a bit more difficult to achieve at this price point, especially since I'll be looking to fit a competent video card inside along with a stronger CPU. After searching through different listings, I eventually came up with this guy, an HP Elite Desk. It was listed for $85 and is nearly turnkey right out of the gate, with the only thing I would add being some sort of solid-state storage to boot from. Since the plan here is to turn it into a 4K-capable emulation system, though, we will need to pair it with a video card to help out. Now, the larger desktop will give us more options when it comes to video cards. Small form factor PCs, typically you'd be using low profile cards, whereas this one is just a larger desktop, so we can pick from a number of other cards. We are still limited though, because the power supply isn't exactly the strongest and most capable. We have a few cards we can pick from. Fortunately, there is one in particular that I'm thinking of that I believe will fit right in with this. $85 later, I have the most popular card used on Steam, the NVIDIA GTX 1650. This one showed up in pretty good shape and even came with the box. This is typically seen as a lower end card, and with 4 GB of GDDR5, isn't exactly lighting up the benchmark scoreboards. However, this will fit nicely for what we need since it can pull all of its power from the PCIe slot, which is good because this HP desktop doesn't have any extra power to give with an 8 or 6-pin connector. There is an HDMI and DisplayPort connection here, so it'll connect nicely to a big screen TV. All right, let's pop the side panel off of our desktop and take a look inside. And you know what? It's not too bad. It does have some dust in here, but no major clumps, and a quick once over with some compressed air should clear most of the surface level dirt out. There are 4 slots for RAM, with 2 already being taken up, equaling 16 gigabytes total. Easy pathway to 32 gigabytes if needed. You can see the stock cooler to the left, which unfortunately will probably get pretty loud during games, but I'll give it a cleaning and add thermal compound just to give it the best shot it has at staying somewhat under control. It does look like there's enough room here for the video card to sit, but I really won't know until I try to drop it in. That's something that you could run into when trying to upgrade these older office PCs. Sometimes there isn't enough clearance for large video cards due to a hard drive caddy or even ports on the board being in the way. This PC did come with a 1 TB mechanical drive, and I think what I'll do is format it and leave it as storage for all different ISO files. I do want to install something faster though to boot from, so I grabbed this SanDisk 480 GB SSD that I had laying around. It's not the fastest thing out there, but its job is to load up Batocera and maybe store a few games that I'm consistently playing, so it's more than up for all of that. I didn't have a bracket for the smaller SSD, however, so I'll just tape it to the hard drive for now. Hey, look, if attaching an SSD with double-sided tape inside a build doesn't embody the series, I really don't know what else can. Oh, and there is a DVD drive in here as well. Not really sure what I'd be using it for, but I guess it's nice to have. Technically, you could watch DVD movies through Kodi and Batocera, so there's that. Quick cleaning of the CPU fan and heatsink, along with a little extra compound for the i7-7700, and it's finally time to test fit the GPU. And, ooh, okay, it's close. With the hard drive cage out of the way, the 1650 fits, and look at that. Everything sits right into place with no clearance issues. I think the cables are mostly out of the way here. There's really only so much cable management that can be done with these office PCs, and I ended up with a Rogue SATA power cable that I just tucked in above the DVD drive. Don't need that thing moving around and finding a CPU or GPU fan. Overall, though, not bad. Now I just need to load up Batocera and see what this PC can do. And looking at this PC, it could also be a pretty decent low-end budget build for even some current PC games. Certainly a lot of the esports titles or Fortnite or anything like that. I think if you keep it within reason of 1080p medium to low settings, you could get a decent enough experience here, but as I mentioned, my target today is to look towards emulation. I installed Batocera directly to the SSD, and after setting resolution of 4K for the system menu, it looks pretty sharp starting up. I've said this over and over again at this point, but Batocera really has the look figured out for getting you into a game quickly, but still keeping a ton of options available behind the scenes, which is what we're going to tap into here for rendering. See, while I have the resolution set at 4K, part of this project is to make these games translate over a bit better, so we're going to move a 6x rendering resolution to match. What this will do is clean up a lot of in-game assets so they don't look blurry on a 4K screen. I also turned on some of the system information for when we're playing different games so you can see any frame rate fluctuations as we go. The goal here is to get a good performance out of the 6th generation systems, and while emulation is imperfect, I'd like to average 60 FPS for the most part. Starting with the Dreamcast real quick, I figured this would be no problem since it's the easiest system out of the bunch to emulate, and as expected, Crazy Taxi is rolling at a smooth 60 FPS. Dreamcast visuals in particular translate well to up-rendering with how clean the original image was compared to something like the PS2. Still, you can see while in-game assets and characters look pretty good, HUD elements unfortunately do not get the same treatment, but more on how we can fix that a bit later. For now, the Dreamcast is an easy 4K 60 FPS on our budget build. This is a good start. Moving over to the GameCube, I was expecting similar results since Dolphin is just such a refined emulator at this point that handling 4K would be no issue for our i7 and 1650. The GameCube also does well when moving up the rendering toggle here. While I'm not showing any Nintendo first-party games because of how they can be when it comes to emulation, I can say most of the games you're thinking about right now look incredible with this configuration. It really was a system with some impressive looking games due to the art style, and because of that, they've aged really well. The one game that typically is a crusher with Rogue Leader put up a fight at first, but once things settled in after initial particle effects and explosions, it was able to hold above 50 FPS most times. Not quite the locked 60 I was looking for. However, for a game that is the benchmark, as many consider, for GameCube emulation, I'll take it. All right, now we're wading into territory where I'm not completely sure what to expect, and that's with the PS2. While PCSX2 has seen some serious strides over the last few years, it still doesn't seem to be quite on the level of Dolphin with optimization. However, when bumping up to a 6x rendering resolution, I was able to hold 60 in just about every game I tried. iNinja was always a weird 3D platformer back then, and was actually always interlaced with no real option for progressive scan, which is a shame because here it looks really clean and super fluid. Budokai 3 still has a bit of a blur effect going on. Maybe that's something I can look into a bit more when I have some time. Jet Li Rise to Honor was one of those experimental type of games that from this generation that really showed studios being creative and trying new things. You would use the analog stick to direct your attacks and combo punches and kicks together. When it clicked, it was a really satisfying control scheme in action. So if someone attacked you from behind, you'd be able to point the analog stick in that direction, flip around, kick them in the face, only to turn around and start beating up the person on the other side. The one game that I tried that had some frame rate issues was God of War 2, and similar to Rogue Leader, ends up being one of the benchmark games for emulating the platform. We'll come back to God of War in a minute, as I have something special to say for that one. Original Xbox was a huge wildcard for me, since it seems to be the least popular with emulation out of these platforms. Unfortunately, whenever I pushed the rendering beyond 3 times, no game would boot. For reference, 3 times up rendering ends up being 1920 by 1440, so not quite up to what I would want for a 4K screen resolution. Everything at these settings did at least run well, and you know what, it still looks significantly better than if we left it at the basic resolution. Jet Set Radio especially shines here, with a lot of that being credited to the art style. So other than the weird situation with the original Xbox, I'd say 4K 60 is completely attainable with this $200 build. So let's try to take things a bit further. See, we can load up custom texture packs that work to replace the lower resolution assets like HUDs, lettering, or environments with higher resolution ones, resulting in a sharp, crisp image. Since we have some headroom here at 4K, I figured, you know what? Why not? Let's take a shot at this and see if this budget build really holds up. These packs are pretty much scattered all over the internet since they're dependent on the community creating them. I had some luck over on Dolphin Forum for finding GameCube packs, and then over on GBA Temp for PS2 packs. There's also a bit of a learning curve on where to place the folders for each emulator so the game recognizes and applies everything when you launch it. When I got that all worked out, I wound up with 3 PS2 games and 1 GameCube game that I want to check out here today. Let's start on the PS2 side with Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, an absolute classic. It's immediately noticeable with HUD elements along with text that pops up during the initial tutorial stage. That's what you'll see most here. A lot of graphics on screen that are typically stuck at low resolution match more with the 4K and rendering upgrades that in-game models receive. Speaking of upgrades, check out 007 Agent Under Fire with a texture pack I came across. It came out just a year after the PS2 launched in the US, and this is how I think most of us think about these games and how they looked when we picture it in our nostalgia-driven minds. Bond's hand does look a bit too clear though, and the lower polygon model looks a little awkward when using gadgets. Otherwise, this is an amazing cleanup for this 4K setup with Agent Under Fire. This, though, might be the most impressive one for the PS2. God of War 2. I told you we'd come back to this. It's already a great looking game on the PS2 and clearly pushed the system back when it released in 2007. People tend to forget it came out after the PS3, but a few months after. And it was a big last hurrah for the PS2 system with a game of this caliber. The texture pack here makes the game look crazy, from the environments to Kratos himself. This looks like the definitive way right now to play this game on a big screen TV. It's also the one PS2 game I found that did struggle at times with frame rate. It wasn't frequent, but when things like magic effects or tons of different things happening from Kratos' combos would fill the screen, there were some moments of drops into the 30s and 40s. These were pretty quick though, and 60 FPS was held for the majority of the time. And finally, let's take a look at a texture pack for the GameCube with an all-time classic, Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes. I remember playing this game back in the day when it first came out, thinking it was incredible to be playing a Metal Gear Solid game on my GameCube. The remake of Metal Gear Solid 1 wasn't as impactful then as one would be now, since it really wasn't that old at the time. But the updated visuals and mechanics being added in from later MGS titles did make this a truly unique game that people still argue over to this day. I actually like the ridiculous Matrix cutscenes though, and since we were still in the era where coming across a cutscene after an hour of gameplay felt like a reward, I had a blast with it. Upgrading the textures here along with 4K makes everything look extremely clean. The HUD ends up being a sore spot without a pack like this, since you end up scrolling through items constantly in Metal Gear Solid, so graphics being sharpened really brings it all together, along with environments matching the character model quality. Kick in the widescreen code, and you have what looks like a full-blown remaster of Twin Snakes. It's that good. And you know what? I think overall, we're pretty successful here. A $200 build that's able to play PS2, GameCube, Dreamcast at 4K with custom texture packs. The original Xbox, kind of strange with what was going on there. And maybe I'll have a chance to look into it a bit more and can sort all of that out. But at the very least, 4K, 60 FPS with custom texture packs shines a whole new light on some of these games. And those are just a few that I managed to find very briefly. There are tons of texture packs out there, so you definitely search some of those up if there is a certain game you want to check out here. But for 200 bucks, I'm pretty happy with what I put together. And also think about the fact that maybe some of you have older video cards that you've stored away, or even just entire builds that you're not using. They may be more capable than you would expect for something like 4K PS2 at 60 FPS. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Do you have any other ideas for different builds and stuff that we could look into the future? Let me know in the comments. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.